I've been absolutely waiting for this day, the day that cabbages came on sale this year, wholesale, and I just managed to get 6 really big, good-sized cabbages they were 2 for $5, so 6 for 15, and that means for $15 I'm going to be able to do a massive batch of sauerkraut, which will keep us in sauerkraut for a while. Tomorrow will end up being sauerkraut day. It won't be today that we'll make it, but what I'll do is I'll show you how as a family we make sauerkraut. And we do tend to do it fairly practically, and hopefully it'll give you a bit of an idea on how to go about it if this is something you've been wanting to give a go to. G'day there, it's Rachel here from Bush Edge Homesteading Australia, and I've got all the bits and bobs out to do the sauerkraut this morning. So what I'm going to do is just show you the ingredients, and it is really, really simple because literally you only need cabbage and salt, but we'll talk a little bit about the cabbage and salt we use. And I've got all the equipment out that we're going to use as well. So I'm going to show you all of that, and then Cubby's going to come and give me a bit of a hand, and we're going to knock out this sauerkraut this morning. Now this here is the recipe that we're going to use today. It is a really basic way of doing sauerkraut. You can obviously scale it up and down depending on the amount of cabbage that you have, so we'll definitely be scaling it up today. I'm also probably going to play around a little bit. I'll do some with a bit of jalapeno and carrot and stuff like that too, and it is really easy just to play around with a few different flavours when you're doing a batch of sauerkraut like this. Ingredients wise, it literally is just cabbage and salt. Sometimes you add a little bit of water if there's not enough brine coming out of the cabbage, but it really is just those 2 ingredients. Cabbage wise, these are the ones that we got yesterday, and they are beautiful big cabbages. And when I was there, it was absolutely frantic trying to get cabbages. In fact, I ended up having a really good conversation with another lady that was there. She actually asked me, hey, are you doing sauerkraut? And I was like, oh, are you doing sauerkraut? And both of us were, because we were getting big lots of cabbages. Although she was getting way, way more than me. And I think it was like, might have been a son or a grandson that was with her, and they were filling up trolley loads of them. And we got on to talking about how we do sauerkraut, and I explained the method that I'm going to show you today. The way that she was doing it is using big barrels and putting whole cabbages in barrels, and that's why they were doing so many. The method that we do is more of the sliced style, probably a little bit more familiar with what you buy when you buy sauerkraut from the shops, but yeah, it sounded really interesting the way that she was going about it. But there were people everywhere getting lots of cabbages. There was actually an area out the back that the forklifts were coming in, and you were basically just having to get the cabbages around those. So it did mean I didn't get to have a look at the ones I was selecting. But even so, most of these are really good, and I'll show you what I look for. Now, this is a really good example of one of the sorts of cabbages that I look for. It's like a really big, dense head, looks nice and green, no slimy bits, and, you know, it's a good looking cabbage. Whereas because of all the franticness, there was one that I probably wouldn't have chosen if I had more time. That's this one here, where it's not as tight a head, and you can kind of see the leaves are a bit looser. It'll still make good sauerkraut, but yeah, ones like this is definitely what we want to look for when we're doing our sauerkraut. Now, the second key ingredient that we need is salt, and I've pulled out 2 salts here, one that we're not going to use and one that we are going to use. Now, when you're doing your fermenting, ideally you don't want salt that's got fillers in it. And this one here, even though it says naturally evaporated sea salt, when you actually look at the back at the ingredients, we can see it's got an anti-caking agent in it. So I'm not going to use that one. That we use for other sorts of cooking. What I'm going to use is this one here. So this one here is, again, evaporated sea salt. However, when we look at the ingredients at the back, it literally is just rock salt, sea salt. There's nothing else in there. The problem with this one is you can probably see in large rock salt type grains, I don't have any that's broken down at the moment, so I'm just going to whiz up a little bit of that in a blender, and that'll just turn it into a bit of a finer grain of salt, which will be easier to work through the cabbage. Now, equipment wise, I've got everything out that I'm going to need. Firstly, we've got the scales because there is a ratio of cabbage to salt that we want to maintain, so that'll help me weigh that out. We've also got a few jars, and that means I can put some cabbage in here with different mixes of like carrots and jalapenos for those flavoured ones. But this container down here, this is the one that I'm going to use for the bulk of the sauerkraut. So this one here is just a food grade container. This is one of the 11 litre ones, done batches in the 20s before as well. Just make sure it's food grade though, because obviously there's a little bit of acidity that builds up when you have your sauerkraut, and that's you know, basically acidifying through the fermentation process. This one here is a bit of a muddler so that I can smack down that sauerkraut, and it kind of just releases the juices in the sauerkraut when you do that to create the brine. And the other thing that I have is some large kind of Ziploc storage bags, and those I use as a bit of a weight over the top. There's a few different ways that you can do that just to keep all that shredded cabbage beneath the brine. One way is just filling these, and you fill it with a bit of brine. It's called a brine bag, and that holds all that cabbage down so that you don't get mold and stuff. Another way is using cabbage leaves, and that's what I'll probably do in these ones, where you use the cabbage leaves just to kind of push down and hold again all that cabbage beneath the brine, and that just stops things from moulding on the surface. So that's pretty much all the stuff that we need for this exercise today. So I guess what we can do is just crack on and start making the sauerkraut. So hubby's going to come in and give me a hand. He normally does all the chopping when we do these sauerkraut days. If there's a boy about, one of them is probably going to help with banging our cabbage in the container and releasing all of that brine. And I'll be working on the station with the weighing, adding salt, and just trying to really get that salt into the cabbage to get all those juices flowing. All right, let's get onto it. So the first thing we need to do is clean things up. Now we do a fair bit of brewing of like alcohols and things like that as well. So that does mean that we've got some sterilization powder that we use for that sort of thing. You don't have to sterilize all these containers, but I do find it's just one extra step that can help prevent molding from happening. Just if you don't have anything like that, just use your normal dishwashing detergent and stuff and just give everything a really good wash before you start. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just rip the leaves off the cabbages. Now, I could have actually taken those leaves off at the shop, and there was a lot of people that were doing that there, but organic matter for us is a wonderful thing here, so we'll just take those off and we'll probably just give them to the chickens. That's assuming the chickens want them at the moment. Last time I gave them greens, there was so much in their enclosure, they were just not interested.
You could always give them to the sheep.
Oh yeah, the sheep could have them. That's a good idea. Now with these, what we're going to do is give them a really good wash. So what we do now is just take off some of the big outer leaves. You can kind of see he's got a few off here. And the idea is that'll sit over the top of the sauerkraut when we put it in these containers and also in the jars, just to hold it all down, because you don't want stuff above the brine. That's when you get the risk of moulding. So yeah, definitely don't forget to take the leaves off before you start chopping up all your cabbages. So while he's doing that, I'm going to start turning this rock salt into something a bit more finer grained. I did just grab out the blender. Where did we put that? Oh, over here. Yeah, so I'm just going to use the little blender, like one of those personal smoothie blenders. You've probably seen me use this a few times before. And yeah, that'll just turn it into a finer grained salt, which is easier to move through the cabbage.
My job is I'm just going to cut in half, take the core out, and then I'm just going to start slicing it up pretty thin. You want it thicker than that or thinner than that?
Oh, let's have a look. Actually, let's bring her around and we'll both have a look.
Do you want it thicker than that or thinner?
No, that's perfect. So that's about the thickness that you're going for when you're doing this. But of course, you know, this is actually personal taste. Like when you do these types of ferments, this is one of the great things about doing it at home. You've actually got choice. So, you know, we do tend to go for thinner, but if you like it thicker, maybe more of a crunch, you can do that too. But yeah, I reckon we go with that today.
Okay, when we do it sauerkraut, I prefer this cabbage than the wombok because the wombok to me goes softer and soggier. I prefer a crunch. Like when we use the sauerkraut, we quite often do it with our stitzels or when we do it with the sausages. So I prefer more of a crunch. So to me, this is a lot nicer than the wombok.
That's why we haven't actually done it this year so far, because I've been on the hunt for these sort of cabbages. They have had the womboks come up a couple of times, and I was tempted to go down and grab some because we're also out of kimchi at the moment. But yeah, thankfully these did finally come up on sale because I didn't think they were actually going to be on sale for a good wholesale price this season. This is the first time I actually saw them. So while Happy is continuing to do that, what I'm going to do is start measuring out some of this cabbage. And what I want to do is make sure I've got about 2.25 kilos of cabbage to every 3 tablespoons of salt in here. So that's why I've got the scales out today. First step, 2.25. And then that's going to go in here. Next, I'm going to pop in the 3 tablespoons of salt. And then I'm going to work that through with my hands a little bit and then pound it with this. Pounding this is a really important part of the process because what you're trying to do is release all those juices from within the cabbage, and that mixes with the salt that we've just added to create the brine. Let me, I'll mix this through and then, yeah, I'll start doing some mixes for those ones. That there is all we're going to put in there. It will go down a little bit more just as that cabbage starts to break down and the brine starts to come out. So with the balance of this here, what I'm going to do is start making some different mixes to put in these jars. And I am going to just play around with the flavours a little bit. I'm actually thinking of doing like a bit of a kimchi flavoured inspired one because I've got a bit of ginger and also a little bit of the gochugaru paste in the fridge. So I might do that in one of these ones, and I'm going to do also like a I'm probably going to say this wrong, Curtido. It's like the South American style with, I think there's a bit of jalapeno, oregano, and I like the idea of the jalapenos that's in that one as well. I haven't actually done that one before. I just saw that shared the other day and thought, oh, that sounds like something we would like. So I'm probably just going to do one lot and give that a bit of a try. I don't have any carrots inside, so I just need to pop out to the garden super quick. There's still lots of really good carrots in here at the moment. I do want to try and aim for a couple that are bigger ones. Makes it easier with the grading. Okay, that's not a bigger one. Let's try again. Although we'll use that too, that won't go to waste. That's better again. Seems to be getting bigger every time I pick one. One more, I reckon. Let's have a look. That one. Oh, the sheep can have that one. That'll be difficult to grate. All right, one more. Oh yeah. That will be heaps better for grating. As you can see, it goes down a fair way once you give that a really good beating. And some of the liquid's starting to come out, but there's not a lot of brine in there, so I will keep a bit of an eye on this one for a little bit and just see if we do get a bit more out. If not, there is a bit of a ratio to adding a little bit of extra brine. And that is that one there. But yeah, I'm not going to jump the gun and do that too quickly because sometimes the salt does release a bit of that liquid over time.
All right, I think that's it. You can actually hear that it's mushy too.
So you're going to head outside and do some other bits and bobs now, aren't you?
Yep, mulch.
Now, as for me, I'm going to work on those other flavours. I have just peeled the first of the carrots. Because they're coming straight out of the garden, they are pretty dirty, so I am giving them a bit of a peel before I grate them. And that just hopefully minimises the introduction of any baddies into our ferment. So carrots all washed up. And I'm just going to grate those so they're ready to go. This one's for the Curtido one. Now this one here, I've got no ratios that I'm working with. It's just purely working with the experience I have with fermenting in the past and that inspiration of those ingredients that I saw for the Curtido the other day. And even the next one that I'll do, which is the kimchi one, it's not the kimchi that I normally do, but it's going to have some flavors that are inspired. So they're probably more like flavored sauerkrauts. But from what I see, well, particularly with kimchi, it doesn't go for as long a fermentation time. And this one here as well, I've seen that this is a bit of a shorter fermentation time too. So I think this one will go for a couple of weeks. So again, not working to any particular recipe, so I just went and got a handful of jalapenos. Even just on their own, jalapenos are beautiful fermented. You can then blend it and turn it into a bit of a hot sauce, or just even eat the rings that are fermented. It's really nice when you do like cheese platters and things like that. If you didn't want this as spicy, you just wouldn't add as many. But we do like a fair bit of spice in this family, so I am adding quite a few. Actually, what I might do though, so I don't get crazy chili hands, is I might start working through the salt in here first, and then I'll add those through towards the end, and that way I'm not getting so much of that capsicum on my hands. Okay, time for those chilies to go in. And I've just realised outside my oregano plant is looking very sad, so I'm not actually going to put any oregano in. So this is definitely an evolving one. It's not going to be exactly the traditional flavours. But I do have a red onion, so Again, pop a bit of that in. And I'm just going to chuck that in quite thinly sliced. And then that'll all get worked in too. It starts to get dangerous if you put your hands in. But I am going to have to mix it up with my hands, and also just to put it into the jars as well. So I do want that fairly evenly mixed through those flavours. It's interesting, this one. It's kind of like almost a bit like a coleslaw, like a fermented coleslaw. But yeah, I'm looking forward to trying it. Anything with chili tends to go down pretty well around here. Right, let's get that in the jar, and I'm thinking we'll use this one. Now, jars wise, this is just an old, I think it's either a pickle jar or a olive jar, nothing special, just with standard lid like that. One of the things I will need to do though is just open that every so often to let any excess gas out. I don't want any broken glass under pressure or anything like that. So that is something that's important. If you're using a vessel that doesn't self-vent, you do have to let excessive pressure out. But you also need to be a little careful on how you do that, because you don't want to introduce air, because air is basically your absolute enemy when it comes to fermenting. So you don't want air to get in. You're really just letting any excess carbon dioxide that gets produced in there to get out. Now, I'm just going to start stuffing this straight in. Again, just using hands. Obviously, you use your hands an awful lot when you do this sort of fermenting. Just make sure they're clean. You know, it's just part and parcel of this type of work in the kitchen. I know some people get a bit funny sometimes about using hands in kitchens, but you know, this is old school cooking. Using hands is just a big part of it. But you do want to make sure they're clean, because you don't want to introduce anything bad into your ferments. Now, as I'm popping it in there, you're probably noticing I'm pushing down as well. That's again just to help with the release of any of the brine. I am thinking this cabbage is really quite dry though, and I probably am going to need to make a little bit of brine up. You can see there's a little bit of the juice in the bottom there, but it's definitely not as juicy as when you use particularly the wombok cabbages, or I think they call them Napa cabbages in America, if you're from that part of the world. Now, it's looking like we might have the perfect amount here with this one. Shouldn't speak too soon, but it's always a wonderful thing when you eyeball it and you got the right amount. You're probably also sitting there and going, my goodness, she makes a big mess in the kitchen doing this. And yes, it is a messy exercise, but we use a lot of the food. You know, you can see all this cabbage is on the bench. That gets picked up. It still goes into the ferments. What I just make sure is that everything is really clean before we start doing this exercise. That way, it doesn't matter if there's things on the bench as well. It's no different to it being on your chopping board. It's looking pretty good. Now, all that brine that was created, we definitely want to pour that in too. And then what I'm going to do is just pop that over to the side, and I'm going to start on the kimchi sort of style flavoured one, and then we'll do all the brine bags and the cabbage on top all at once and top up with brine as required. Now with this last one here, again, it's going to be the cabbage and the salt, but there's two other things I'm going to add that's going to make it a little bit more of a kimchi-inspired ferment. Now, this is not how we normally do kimchi, and if you do want to see how we normally do our kimchi, that method is absolutely delicious. It's also really, really easy, and it's quite a quick ferment as well. But this one here, I'm just winging it a little bit. I'm going to throw in a bit of Korean gochujang, which I had sitting in the fridge, so figured why not use that. That's a quick way to add a bit of a different flavour to this one, and also a bit of ginger as well. So with the ginger, I'm just going to grate it straight in. You might have noticed there, I'm not particularly precious about whether the skin is on or off when it comes to the ginger. I find it's just an extra bit of work, to be totally honest, when you're doing the peeling of ginger with this sorts of thing. You just need to make sure it's clean. And then what I'm going to do is throw in, well actually I'll do the salt first. That way I can use the same spoon. And then we'll get that paste in. Ooh. I needed that spoon, didn't I? So that's what that paste looks like. And I'm actually going to finish this. It's been sitting in there for a little while, so it needs to be used. In fact, it's actually drying out a little bit. I am going to get my fingers in there, which is always a bit dangerous when you start working with chili, but yeah, if you've got gloves or something, you could use gloves for this step, but I'm just going to get stuck in there. Oh, a bit of garlic could actually be good in this too. Ooh, do I? Yeah, I should. It'll add a nice hit of extra flavour. Just trying to mince up nice and fine, and I can go straight in. And with that all mixed now, that's going to go in a jar too. The jar I'm going to use for this one is one of our FLAVOURS jars. It's one of the nice big ones. I like these. These are the number 36s. And they've got these plastic lids that you can get to go on top of them. I like the idea of the plastic, that it could pop rather than glass popping under pressure if needed. But again, we'll need to manually vent that. Yeah, so again, I'm just going to pop that straight in to the jar, and every so often I'll just kind of push that down with my hand just to make sure it is all firmly packed in there. In fact, with this narrow one, these are quite good too. You need a little bit of room on top, so I don't want to overstuff it. I'll be able to get that bit of cabbage in just to hold all the little bits beneath the brine. Now, whilst I've been working on the other sauerkrauts, I did find that the level on this went down a little bit when I pounded it again, so I've just added a little bit more cabbage. I did want to bring the head space up a little bit. I don't want too much of a gap, and that means I just need to add a little bit more salt again too. Now, I've waited a little while, but I'm still not entirely happy with the amount of brine that is in these. They were on the drier side of cabbages, so we are going to need to make a little bit of a brine up. The ratio that we're going to be working to is about a litre, or actually I'm going to go with a percentage. Let's go with, I'm going to go for probably a 2% brine. So let's go with 20 grams to a litre of water just to top those up. So that's our litre of water. It's just a different brand of sea salt, but again, it's one without any fillers in it. And I just want 20 grams in there to make a 2% brine. Whoop. Oh, I went, well, I was going to say slightly over. It's actually closer to 3%, but you know what? That will be perfectly fine. Now, whilst that is dissolving, what I'm going to do is just clean the sides of these a little bit. I don't want any bits of cabbage or anything like that sticking up, because that will be just surfaces that you can get mold on. And the other thing I'm going to do is get some of those cabbage leaves, and I'm going to pop those in as well, just to push everything down, just to make sure you don't get any little floaty bits coming up. Because it's basically anything that ends up above the brine is what is susceptible to mold. So you just want to keep that under the brine. Now I'm using my hand because my hands were clean. Probably cleaner than trying to get a cloth or something like that in here. And I'll wipe the outside after we've sealed these up. So I just did the first one with the cabbage leaves and realised I didn't press record. So I'm going to show you on this second one here. With the cabbage, it's good to tuck kind of the sides down a little bit if you can. Because what you're trying to do is just make sure that nothing can get in around your cabbage leaf and start floating. And I've got a couple here that I'll wedge in there. Now, there's probably a little bit more headspace in here than I would ideally like with a ferment. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab a couple of my glass weights, and that will help with that situation. You don't have to use the glass weights when you've got your cabbage underneath the brine, but yeah, that just to me is just a little bit too much headspace. Basically, the more headspace you've got, the more opportunity you have for mold. So if I can minimize that, that's a good idea. These are the glass weights that I use. They're ones that came with a Mason Tops fermenting kit that I use. You might have seen that in some of our previous videos. And all I'm going to do is just pop that on top of each, and that'll just make sure it holds it down. Now, this one here, I might just stuff with a whole bunch more cabbage, and that'll keep it down and kind of minimise that headspace, because I do have a fair bit of cabbage leaf still left here. Really get that tucked in there. All these bits of cabbage, they ferment too, and they are also good eating at the end. So yeah, definitely don't waste that when you open it back up again. Okay, maybe one last bit, a nice big one just to hold it all down. And then of course we're going to want that all covered with the brine as well, because even this being on top of the surface is also something that could be susceptible to mold. Still not quite dissolved. I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here with the leaves. And again, just make sure that it was all held down. There's no bits of cabbage like this on the sides. I'm just going to push all that down into there. That's all our cabbage leaves in. But what I want to do now is pop in the brine bag. So with the brine bag, all we're going to do is grab a Ziploc bag, and we're going to fill that. And that actually sits inside here and it holds it all down, similar to what we've done with the glass weight over here. Now, the reason that we use brine inside of this is just in case our Ziploc bag does actually break whilst it's in here. If it breaks, you don't really want water that's then going to dilute your ratio of your brine. Make sure that's closed properly. And then that's going to go on top and hold that down. I do like to have it, just spin that around so you can see the seam up a little bit like that. I do need to make more brine because that there all needs to be under the surface as well. I've got a second one of these going as well just to speed things up a little bit. And all I want to do is just top each of these up. You can actually see there is a fair bit of brine in here. Actually, I'll move you in a little closer. You know, with this one here, it's probably up to about here. It's not too bad. but it does need to be over that glass weight. So that's what we're going to top it up to. I actually tend to find I probably feel a lot more than I see some other people do with their ferments. I just find the less headspace, the less risk there is of mould. But yes, there probably will be some people going, leave more space. So those ones are ready for me to put the caps on. I'll just clean that bit off too. And I am just having a bit of a visual check just to make sure nothing floated above the surface there. But it all looked quite good, which means those caps can go on. And that one. Salt in the bottom there too. Ideally it should be completely dissolved so that you do have your percentage ratios right. I am starting to rush a little bit at the moment, which is always a danger at the last moment, but the family's outside and they're doing that mulch at the moment, and I know they could do with an extra set of hands. There we go. Cap on as well. And then lastly is this one. And I do think I'm going to need to go make another batch, maybe even 2. Yeah, I'll probably need to do 2 with this one, I reckon, because there is still quite a bit of headspace to fill. And when you're doing the brine, often it's a good idea just to get a big pot, get your ratios right, heat it up so that it all dissolves through quickly and thoroughly. This is me cutting some corners right at the moment, so I do just want to say that that does come with a little bit more of a risk, but yeah, I'm okay with that. That's pretty much all dissolved now, so I'm going to pop that next bit of brine in. And hopefully between these two we'll have enough. Oh, will it be enough? Oh, it's close but not quite. Oh, actually, I think I've got a little bit of air in that bag as well. You can see it's starting to float a little bit. I don't want that. That means there's a bit of air in there, so I just need to get that last bit of air out of the bag too. Much happier with that. So now I can pop that lid on. Make sure it's on properly. And there we go. That's pretty much all of them ready to spend a little bit of time fermenting now. So in terms of where they'll ferment, I'm going to pop all these in the study. It's a bit of an area that's a little bit cooler, so we don't let the heat from the fire go there. We also always pop something underneath them as well, because they are liable to overflow a little bit, particularly when you fill them as much as we do. So I definitely don't want to ruin my carpet or anything, so putting something to catch any excess liquid underneath is a very, very good idea. In terms of how long to leave these for, well, I'm probably going to do slightly different times on each of these. I'm thinking this one here I'm going to leave for a couple of weeks. These ones here I'll probably leave for about a week. And this one here, it really does come down to the temperature. So with this, ideally, 15 to 18 degrees Celsius, it's about 5 or 6 weeks. 21 to 24, 3 to 4 weeks. I do tend to like to leave it a little bit longer. Normally we go about 6 weeks. We don't strictly stick to those temperatures, but that is the ideal if you are looking for a bit of guidance when you're getting started. So yeah, I'm going to pop those in the study now. And in terms of how this all ends up, when it comes to the sauerkraut, if you want to see what it's like when the sauerkraut's done and we open this up, and also how we pack it into jars and then store it, I do have a separate video which I'll link for you guys so that you can get straight to that and not have to wait around until this is actually fermented and we do all that. With these ones here, I might actually grab some clips and share that in a future video, because these ones, to me, they're experimental. I'm not quite sure how they'll go. And that way I can give you a little bit of feedback if 2 weeks for this one and the 1 week for these is actually sufficient or not, or if I should have actually gone a little bit longer like the normal sauerkraut. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed following along as we made this most recent batch of sauerkraut. Definitely looking forward to it being ready. Have to be patient though. And yeah, hopefully those instructions help you if this is something you want to have a go yourself too. As always, thanks so much for joining. Catch you later.
The Michael Jackson song.
Oh yeah.